Hello, everyone. Welcome to the
Hello.
Alright Show.
Hi.
Hello.
As you can see, we have some troublemaker guest panelists.
Familiar faces today.
Yes. So welcome along, Louise and Ronnie, for this discussion about the well, interesting, isn't it? Because we've just had a declaration of victory, really, in terms of the live export, the British end of the live export thing. So we're going to kind of have a look at that, have a look at the length of the campaign and the kind of effect of it, and then maybe a bit of analysis towards the end. Let me do a little bit of housekeeping first, if I can find my... Yeah. For people tuning in, feel free to comment. We don't make people pay to have their comments on the screen, so feel free about that. And then the best interactive chat is on my YouTube channel. So it's also going out to 2 Facebook pages, but if you comment from either of those, that's mine and the Vegan Review, we'll be able to see your comments, but you won't be able to see if anybody in the comments replies to you. So that's the best place to be, really. Almost done. So yeah. So Wendy, can you say Malates, please?
Can I say? Oh, sorry, Malates.
Malates, yeah. Nella, can you say Malates, please?
Can I say what? Sorry, my sound.
Can you say Malates, please?
Malates.
Yeah. Ronnie?
I see where this is going.
This is a joke. This is a joke, isn't it? Now.
Oh, say Malates, Ronnie.
The trouble is, no,
I know where he's
I've
going.
just out the joke. You see, the trouble is, there's 5 of us, and they're not 4.
Yeah, I'm not saying it. So, Louise, you want to say Malates for me and not be awkward like Ronnie?
I'll say Malates as well, just to make it
right. Okay, so that's the formalities out of the way.
Yay! Boom, boom. You see one week? Yes.
Right. So
I think every time you tell a joke, Roger, you should tickle your beard as your little punchline. Could be a little could be a little thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Like a signature.
Yeah, like a little signature.
If you insist, never mind. Okay, so should we do some hellos? We've got Jeremy the Ape was the first, so welcome along, Mr. Ape. Do we say Mr. Ape? Oh, that's an interesting one, isn't it, Mr. Ape, language-wise? Yeah. Then we got Deb. Hi, Deb. Carolyn Harris, welcome, Carolyn. Linda, hi Linda, Linda Carroll, and that's everyone so far. Do say hello in the comments if you're there. There is more people than that actually online at the moment. So right, so live exports. I think we've all had a little bit of experience with the live export campaign. I know probably the person who had most is probably you, Louise.
Yeah, probably from the point of Coventry Airport many years back. That was quite an incredible campaign that was launched, and it was flights going from Coventry Airport out to Europe, taking carbs for the veal trade, and there was a big campaign at Coventry Airport. And there was there was a lot of people there at the time, and that was one of the very first kind of AR camps that was situated up on the ring road, the main road, and there were literally hundreds of people there every week. And I went there and I ran on at the airport. This was a weekly occurrence, not by me, by other activists. And then I joined in with that because Jill Phipps, who was a prominent campaigner to end live exports at that particular airport and to raise awareness of live
We've lost
under
your
the wheels.
audio, Louise.
Sorry, darling.
Oh,
that's
you
it.
cut
You're
out then,
back.
Louise. A little
Did I?
moment, yeah.
Did I?
Hmm.
Where do you want me to go from?
Well, no,
Where
we'll
did
we'll
it
come
stop?
we'll come back to that. We just wanted to use that as a
Okay.
bit of an intro. And so, what we're going to show first, everyone, is this is the kind of celebration that compassionate wool farming, which presumably you could, I would probably say that compassionate wool farming is probably the lead organisation in this campaign, and it has been for many decades. So this is what they put out anyway.
Exports have finally been banned from Britain.
For decades, compassion supporters, animal activists have campaigned relentlessly.
During years of campaigning, we never gave up.
When millions of British farm animals were being exported every year in the 1990s.
Protesters from all walks of life joined together to give these animals a voice.
In the face of public outcry, passenger ferries stopped exporting animals.
From English ports to the continent for slaughter or fattening.
Investigations exposed the cruelty.
And local protests stopped live exports.
From Shoreham, Plymouth, Coventry Airport and Brightling Sea.
Protests continued at ports, outside Parliament and across the country.
Mass petitions were submitted to the government.
A court case forced action. The export of unweaned calves was finally halted by the Scottish Government.
And now a British live export ban.
This moment has been years in the making, and it's thanks to the hard work and dedication of so many people.
The British animals will be spared long grueling journeys across Europe and beyond.
Because of you,
calves will no longer have to endure up to 23 hours without food whilst being transported to veal farms.
Because of you,
sheep won't suffer for hours on trucks, only to be slaughtered when they reach their destination.
Together we stop food trade. Together we ban exports.
And there was a little kind of dedication to Jill at the end of that. And in fact, this that film really kind of answered Deb's questions. Were they exported by ship or plane or truck? So what tends to happen is that the trucks take them to the ships, and the trucks don't go on the ships. That's usually in relation to the planes. I did see that someone put out an archive show showing kind of new vegans, as it were, some archive materials, and one of them was about Jill Phipps, and people were quite shocked the fact that they were transported in planes. And I suppose in some senses you wouldn't expect that, like if you were to ask members of the public, how do you think calves are transported overseas, they probably wouldn't think of planes, would they? But that certainly ended up being the case.
No, I always thought it was quite odd that they were being exported by plane. I always thought that was really strange, and it was very strange to witness as well. These calves being taken up, a ramp into the back end of a plane. I mean, it was a big plane, a big Aeroflot plane, and I always, my memory of that was just unbelievable. I just thought all these little bodies trying to get up onto this slippery kind of ramp, being forced up, and you could hear them if the engines weren't on. But if the engines were on, and often or not, the airport and the planes would keep those engines running, so you couldn't hear the calves crying.
Yeah, it's interesting really, because I've always argued, and although there's a nuance to this, but I've always argued that because I think probably we're all have got some skeptical views about single issues and welfare-based single issues, this kind of stuff. But the live export thing, I've always argued, has got a genuine welfare component. And you kind of touched on it there, Louise, in the sense that normally what happens in normal exploitation of our fellow animals is that they're fattened on the farm onto a truck to a slaughterhouse, right? But as you say here, what you've got is onto a truck, a long distance to a port or an airport, and then onto something else, and then off of that again, presumably onto more trucks to go then to wherever they're going, right? And so in that sense, I can see that there is a kind of genuine welfare component to this particular campaign. You know that slogan, we probably all heard it, that it's better to be on the hook rather than on the hoof. Yeah. That, I think that's kind of right in a way, because if they're gonna kill them, it's better to do it quick and not far away from where they were farmed, rather than send them overseas. And the problem with the reason they send them overseas is, I think it's to do with refrigeration issues, because normally they go to places like Egypt and Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, where the refrigeration issue is not so good, and so consequently they want live fellow animals and not dead ones to arrive, because they can't deal with the frozen carcasses. But they can deal with the live ones. Yeah, and I think there's also another weird little law. For example, when the live exports went to France, for example, if you send them to France, then put them in a field for a couple of weeks, then the French farmers can claim that these were French cows, or it's French beef. So there was that kind of technicality, the reason why they would want a live animal. Yeah,
I think that doesn't. I think the problem is that the demand from those countries that import the animals hasn't changed. So really all that's going to happen now is that instead of importing those animals from the UK, they will just import them from other countries instead. And so there'll be no reduction in live exports. The live exports will just come from elsewhere. And so we have an example here of a problem being moved around rather than being solved. And really the solution to the problem is really to educate people in those countries that are receiving the animals to become vegan. And so that reduces, and hopefully eventually will end the demand for those animals to be imported.
Yeah, I do know that, because I'm familiar with the campaign that the Australian activists launched, and I think they actually stopped the live exports. But it transpired that what you just said there, Ronnie, is exactly what happened. They got them from somewhere else, which was further away. Right.
And the other thing is, sorry, Roger, I was just going to say the other thing is that this ban has occurred because of Brexit, because previously, as part of the EU, the UK had to comply with EU regulations, and so I think the situation was that the UK couldn't unilaterally end live exports or ban live exports. And so this has been heralded as a great victory for Brexit, something wonderful that's come out of Brexit, that the UK has banned live exports, but they haven't actually banned. The ban is very limited. It's only, and we can look at this later, it's only in relation to certain animals. It's only in relation to certain animals. But you see animals are exported long distances from many EU countries. For instance, there was a case, wasn't it, a couple of years ago, where there was a blockage in the Suez Canal, and there were some large ships were held up for long periods of time, and some of those ships had live animals on board that I think were going to sort of Middle Eastern countries. And there was real concern about the suffering of those animals on those ships. Well, I think that the majority of those animals, the ships were from Spain and from Romania. Each of those are EU countries. And the problem is that when the UK left the EU, it meant we no longer had any say over what the EU did. So people in this country really have lost their say in preventing live exports from the other EU countries, which are continuing. You see, so it's we to a large extent we've lost our ability to prevent the live exports from those other EU countries, and those animals are just as important. There was someone on that film talking about British animals, wasn't he? But it doesn't matter whether they're British animals or they're animals from whatever country. They're still going to undergo suffering and trauma during those journeys, and we've lost our ability largely to prevent the live exports that go from the EU.
I have two questions, and I have very mixed feelings about this ban. When I first read about it, my reaction was any ban is a good thing, because in the process, vegans rub shoulders with non-vegans. They may raise awareness about the oppression of other animals. People can start thinking about it, all these things. And of course, I don't believe that a million welfarist reforms will end to animal liberation. But the footage we just saw is from a kind of extreme group, in the sense that these are not vegans. These are people that want to continue consume the flesh of other animals. They just don't want to have feel guilty about it. So I wouldn't expect something different from them. But I want to hear about the vegan organizations that participated in the ban and how they frame it, because I think this is very important. And from your experience, Louise, what kinds of people were on site during these campaigns? Were they vegans? Did they frame it in a different way? Was this just one of the many things they did during the week for the other animals? How was the whole atmosphere on these places? At this place,
I think there was kind of different aspects to different campaigns. Like down at Shoreham, it brought a lot of people in who were meat eaters, and they just didn't like live exports, and that's what they were up in arms about. And they got very angry about big lorries coming through the ports full of animals going on to other countries, and they seemed to be very angry about that side of it, and it was kind of local to their town, and they thought it was disgusting. You did get people changing. There were people who were meat eaters that then decided to go vegan because the penny dropped that these animals were being exported, and they were, many of them were eating those animals themselves, and so some of them actually did become long-term animal rights campaigners. Many of them did not, however. Many of them just didn't like the live exports and came from a welfarist point of view, and then just disappeared after that campaign was then gone. But in Coventry, that was a totally different ball game. That was grassroots, animal rights, wholeheartedly, mostly vegan, and it was fought by people like John Curtin and Jill Phipps, Nancy Phipps, Gary, and all of those that were in the local kind of Coventry animal rights group, and then other people came in on top of that. I'm not saying that all of them, there were people who ate meat and they came along, and some of them from Shoreham, they did the same thing. They wanted to support the campaign in Coventry, but the Coventry campaign to me was a very different beast altogether, and had predominantly an animal rights picture behind it. That was your grassroots militant animal rights that drove that campaign to see Coventry airport, stop it altogether. And they were successful in that, I have to say, but not without the death of a really good campaigner such as Jill Phipps, and a beautiful human being. So a terrible price to pay all round, really, for the calves and for her and her family and friends. But to me, that was very, very different. Yes. And it was a campaign that I was very kind of pleased to be involved in, and my mum as well. She was involved with it as well. And we all just gathered together, and that's what started the campaign off. And that's what made that awareness grow and start a wider national debate on live exports and eating meat in general as well, and from an animal rights perspective, not just from a welfare perspective.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear all of that, Louise. And I used to get involved in the protests at Ramsgate, around the port of Ramsgate, and I remember having like a real battle sometimes, because just like you said, there were a real mixture of people there. There were kind of more, what we'd say, more militant animal rights, abolition, grassroots people, mixed with compassion, and the welfare groups with their on the hoof, not the on the hook, not the hoof. And then I was always really mindful of like, how do I frame this? If I take my banner, what do I say? Because I want it to be different to the welfare banner. So I used to kind of, say things like these are rights violations, and just, try and frame the language and things like that. But even then I used to always have this battle of, this is like a welfare thing. Obviously, even if these exports were banned today, we're still left with the fact that it's not the fundamental wrong of the breeding and the use, the enslavement, and all of that. And then I used to have this battle, and then I read The Oxen at the Intersection by Patrice Jones, and it's such an incredible book. I highly recommend it if anyone hasn't read it. And Nella and I both read it several times, and both big fans of this book. And something that Patrice talks about in that book that really kind of helped me when I used to go to these protests was, she talks about how we can't just sacrifice the well-being of our fellow animals on the altar of principles and ideals and ideas, because actually, while we don't just want the reforms to be that's the end of it, reforms will actually help actual living individuals. And that's just something that really struck me, because and then there was another battle while I was there, because, and the weird thing is at Ramsgate as well, is it's almost like the protests became normalized, because the police used to allow the protesters to stop the trucks. It became like a little ritual. So the trucks would come down, and there was like a big roundabout where they turned off towards the port, and the protesters would all be there, and we'd like block the road, and the police would let that happen. It was almost like, okay, you've got like 10 minutes here now where the trucks stop, and the trucks knew that they had to stop. And it became like a thing, and that really bothered me, because I thought, wow, they're just absorbing the protest here. This is like not even a protest anymore. It's just like a dance that we're doing. But one thing I used to love being able to do was just to give some water to the individuals in the trucks. And often, again, another welfare point, like Roger was saying, is a lot of those spouts that used to give the water, they did not work. Most of the time, all the trucks that I used to see, half of those water spouts weren't working, and so the individuals weren't getting any water. And it just used to obviously break our hearts. So we would be able to just give them water. But then there's that whole thing of like, are you prolonging their suffering, because now you're making the truck stop for an extra 10-20 minutes in this hot weather with no water, because you can't get to all of the individuals on the truck. So then you've got this whole battle of like, am I helping them? Am I hindering them? This for my ideals of abolition, but it's still welfare. You just go through all of this stuff. But I think it's really difficult. And like Nella said, I kind of really have struggled with this ban thing, because I think it's good that this is going to help some individuals, but I feel at the end of the day, it's not going to be enough. And one thing that I'd like to maybe all of you to kind of like maybe give your opinion on is, if if big organizations are calling for these bans, and like you saw there, it's RSPCA, it's Compassion in farming, and all of in world farming, and all these people, and lots of non-vegans are really on board with these campaigns. Should we, as more kind of abolitionist, we want to end the use and murder altogether, should we be getting involved in these kind of protests? Because where is our time and energy best spent? Because I feel that there's a place for these things, but is it for us? Because there's only limited people who feel like we do. So shouldn't we be the ones out there putting out the stronger message and let the welfare people do these kind of campaigns so that they work alongside each other in some way? Or can we build on them? Can we capitalize on this kind of thing, I guess, is my question there.
I think that we should participate in these campaigns, but we should craft our own message. Not just adopting the message of this organization, but go there with a clear abolitionist message. And I have in mind a completely different campaign that is happening here, like for many years, about the donkeys that have been oppressed and exploited and abused at the same time. And there are some welfarist voices, but the vegan people go to these protests and these campaigns with a very clear message. They ask for water, they ask for shadow and sheds and all this stuff, they ask for beds, but at the same time they say that these individuals are not means of transport. So I think that being there as a vegan in any kind of campaign and having a clear abolitionist message helps at least put the message out there. I don't know, what do you think about it?
My feeling is that this brings out complications that might not arise when you think about other campaigns. Going back to what you said, Wendy, Carolyn is saying that this apparently has been announced. The act will ensure that animals are slaughtered domestically in high welfare UK slaughterhouses. So that, from an animal rights point of view, is incredibly problematic, right? So you've got the fact that, Wendy, you say some of our fellow animals will be helped in a kind of weird way, and speciesists will really not understand this, because they'll say, yeah, but they're going to be killed earlier because of your campaign. Right. So if without the campaign, they would live longer, even though they'd be on the ships, because species have got this kind of weird thing, don't they? They don't, it's almost like the duration of their life equals quality or something, right? So there's that part of it. And then there's this second part. So reinforces our position as a nation of animal lovers and a world leader on animal welfare, boosting the value of British so-called meat and helping to grow the economy. So this is from a British website. And so you could see from that statement how terribly kind of difficult it is, because, who's being helped in what way? Because essentially they're actually the same animals that would have ended up, in Egypt will be killed in Britain.
But will they though? But will that happen? Because what's happening is you've cut off a source of demand. Basically, what happens is there's going to be no more
it's a
demand.
Source of supply, you mean supply?
No. Well, it's a demand that there's no more supply going to be going to those other countries because the demand has been cut off. And so, as I said earlier, what's going to happen is those countries that imported the animals from the UK will now be importing them from other countries, right? So there'll be no demand for UK animals to go to those other countries. So therefore, it won't be a case of those animals being slaughtered in UK slaughterhouses. Instead, those animals, in a sense, won't exist because they won't be bred, because there will no longer be a demand for them. And that demand instead will be for other animals.
This is the quandary, Ronnie, isn't it? Because you started off by saying there's going to be a continuing demand, and so therefore that demand is going to be met by other countries. Or, I mean, like we haven't cut off any demand. What we've cut off is a supply chain. But
yes, that's right. But the supply. What's happening is because there's no longer a demand on the UK to supply those animals. That means basically the demand for those
the demand
animals
is still there, Ronnie. It's just that we won't supply it.
The demand now will have switched to other countries, and so that and those animals will be supplied from other countries. So there's no reduction in the number of animals that will be transported and eventually slaughtered in those other countries. They'll just come from other countries and probably from other EU countries instead. But there'll be no longer a demand from the importing countries for those animals to be produced in the UK to be exported. If you see what I mean, so it isn't that those animals.
What that means, Ronnie, is this is a lie, isn't it?
Yes, it's not true because it's not true that those animals will be slaughtered in UK slaughterhouses instead. Those animals, in a sense, won't come into being because there won't be any demand for them to come into being because that demand now has switched from the UK to other countries to supply them to the importers.
But if the UK has a ban and Australia has a ban, then maybe what may happen is that live exports are, at some point stopped altogether, and of course that means that there will be need for non-live exports. So our fellow animals will be exported as mutilated corpses, but. I feel that this is where the whole thing is going, because now, I mean, there is the technology, there is this huge ships that can, transfer flesh. Maybe it was cheaper to transport those individuals while still alive. Maybe this was more convenient or whatever, but it can be done because there are other major players like France and Holland, the Netherlands, that export huge quantities, but I'm not sure if they have live export. I think they don't. So
no, I think that it's difficult to imagine that kind of struggling to get live other animals on and off boats and planes is easier than just frozen stuff. It's hard to imagine that that's true. And as I said, I think it's because of that refrigeration point, which again means that the British government are kind of lying if what they're trying to say is that we've stopped the cruel bit, but we'll still be doing the supply, but they'll be supplied from our. There's an element of racism here.
Oh yeah, totally.
Our lovely UK slaughterhouses will now supply the frozen carcasses, right? And that's gonna be much kind of better. But whether that's even a feasible scenario, we don't know, because we don't even know if the receiving countries have got the facilities to take frozen goods. Because that's usually, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, that's usually the reason that was given, the fact that they would, because again, going back to my first point, it seems to me that sending them live has got to be more difficult than just putting them in boxes, and bugging them on planes and ships in a refrigeration area.
It's already happening with some species, though. I mean, the last time I went to take to take some pictures from the fish market here, and I saw fishes from Canada. So I assume they came here by fridge boats. So it's already happening with fishes, for example, everywhere.
When we were campaigning and stuff in Coventry and further afield, there was a lot of people talking about not having live exports at all, but actually bringing carcasses in, and you would literally put your head in your hands and kind of go, oh my God, this is just going to go on. But it's just that you don't like the live export side of it, but you're quite happy to see body parts being frozen and taken out. And eventually those countries probably will get their refrigeration sorted. And that's the way it will go, that each country will knock the kind of live export thing on the head, but actually still bring in carcasses and export them out, but frozen. And that will be seen as being much more humane, even though it isn't, and you're still still, I mean, the whole debate of whether, in terms of like eating meat, we should be actually coming right away from all of that, and we're not, in terms of animal rights, environmental, all of that.
No, but
we're not
that,
seeing
that
any
raises
of
that raises Ronnie's fundamental starting point, which was that where should our energy be put? Because
to me, it's a diversion. It's a diversion. For vegans, it's a diversion from what we should be doing. As vegans, what we should be doing is educating others to become vegan, and anything that diverts us away from that, I think, is questionable, and I certainly think this is. And I think in terms of actually, what we really want to achieve, which is animal liberation, and also in a more, more immediately in terms of sparing the maximum number of animals from slaughter and suffering, that the best use of our energy, best use of our resources is to educate others to become vegan and not to become involved in these welfarist campaigns.
No, but it seems to me that this throws the onus, the kind of responsibility onto the vegans to decide whether to take part in these welfare campaigns, because the welfare groups like compassionate farming, they're not going to do vegan campaigns. It's the same as there's this kind of RSPCA thing coming up, isn't there? Where there's people are trying to get the RSPCA to be a vegan organization. That's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen that compassionate farming and going to be a vegan organization. And so then the dilemma for the vegans is, do we then take part in any way at all in their campaign, which is going to be fundamentally welfarist? Because that's always been the problem.
Is there a way that we can use these reforms as a springboard, as a catalyst in some way, and in order to then educate? Because I was thinking about this, and I get so frustrated, because I think, how can people care so much that they get off their asses and they go to these protests and they stand there week after week and they care, and there's all these articles written about the welfare of these individuals who are stuck in the sea for weeks on end, and oh no, they're gonna like have no food, no water. And I think, how do they care so much, and they're out there doing all this campaigning and spending all this time, and yet they're not vegan? And I get so frustrated, my mind boggles over it. But then I thought, well, what's the alternative to that is worse, because imagine if they actually didn't care. Imagine if there was people out there and they were like, oh, just let the cows rot on the sea, who cares, let them just rot, we're just going to eat them anyway. So I started to think, well, at least there's a little bit of a positive there. People have got a little bit of a level of care. Can we use that? Can we take that higher in our campaigns, in our education, rather than thinking, oh, we're just like lost? Actually use that, the fact that there are these people, these welfarist people out there who do have a level of care, and they are out there taking action as well. That's another thing, because a lot of people, vegans, are not out there taking action.
What on an ideological level does it mean? It goes back to what Jeremy the Ape was saying. That the reason that they don't like the live exports is because they see it as low welfare, right? And as soon as then, the high welfare. So these were the people that Louise was talking about, that as soon as this happens, they're quite happy and they'll go home, right? Because
isn't that the point we have to get to them? At that point, go, hang on, how come you're happy with, you don't like this, but you're happy with this? Can we get in those gaps somehow?
As been said before, there are people that went vegan because of those campaigns, and there are some that went on to become very good vegan activists as well. And so maybe the attitude of vegans to those campaigns is to go along with the objective of veganizing the other protesters. In other words, that you're going there and you're giving vegan information to the actual campaigners to educate them to become vegan, because we do know that people have become vegan because of involvement in those things. So we could maybe increase, cause an increase in that by maybe targeting those demonstrations with vegan information.
And that definitely happened at Camp Beagle as well. There were a lot of people who were not vegan campaigning there, and a lot of them who did stop to live vegan because of everything and all the vegans they were rubbing shoulders with and hearing the messaging and understanding it a bit more. So it does definitely work that way. And we've talked about that before, haven't we? Is it easier to turn an activist vegan than it is to turn a vegan into an activist? It's sometimes easier because they're already switched on to something. There's something in their brain that goes, hang on, I'm not happy with this. There's an injustice here. So maybe, those people we can get to.
Well, that ironically is one of the logics of intersectionality, that if people who are activists in all kind of things are rubbing shoulders with each other, then it's going to kind of rub off. I want to just go through these slides just to kind of like for especially for people who kind of are not familiar with the campaign. I was going to do this a little bit earlier, but we got sidetracked as we normally do. So this first slide here, I mean, you recognise the magazine, Ronnie. I'm sure. I don't know, Wendy. You may as well. The Ag from Questionable Farming. So this is 1976, and this was posted by Kim Stallwood, who went vegan in 1976. And so this is talking about the beginning of, or at least early days of, the live export campaign. So this is, to put it into context, Ronnie, this is only 4 years after you went vegan. Right. I mean, and so the campaign has been running most of the time that you've been vegan.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a kind of massively long time to get something where there's no definite outcome.
That's really made no difference, to be honest.
I don't know whether you could say that, but it's not.
I think what's happened is it's just, as I said earlier, it's going to cause, all that's going to happen is those countries are now going to import the animals from other countries instead. So this massive long campaign has just caused things to be moved around, really.
Wendy, the live animal exports thing, that was from you, right? And so was there anything that you wanted to pick out on that document, or was it just...
No, I was just kind of looking at the numbers, and it's just mind-boggling, really, isn't it? That's just in, I think, 2016, those numbers of export from the UK, and it's just mind-boggling, the numbers, and also it's just interesting to show, the language there as well, for production, for slaughter, for breeding, and it's, I don't know, it just kind of struck me, just the commodification of it all, the language of it all. This, like, these individuals are nothing but just a product, just a commodity to be shipped around and sent around, we're going to send these out for slaughter. Basically, you're sending them away to be murdered, or to be sexually violated, or, and it just the way things are framed in our speciesist societies never ceases to shock me when you see it in black and white like that, I think.
Yeah, Jeremy doesn't like table one, and I suppose, yes, you wouldn't really. So for slaughter, for breeding, for production, I mean, we've got such an exploitative language, as we know. So going back to what Louise was saying about Jill, so to the left is Jill Phipps, who lost her life trying to stop a lorry going to the airport. And then the picture to the right is your picture, Ronnie. So this is the, I suppose, the lead organisations, perhaps. You've got the RSPCA, one called CALE. I'm not familiar with CALE.
It's Kent Against Live Exports, CALE is.
Oh, okay. And then you've got Compassionate World Farming. So Again, I suppose what you could say is that this is a welfare campaign run by welfareists, and the issue for us on this show is to what extent do we engage with this kind of stuff? Are we bothered about what this welfare campaign is doing? I think there's a historical problem in the movement, which is that compassionate farming was always seen as part of the animal rights movement, which of course it isn't. It's just that it was seen that way, right? And so this is where you end up with a problem. I mean, now this problem has leached so far down that the RSPCA are now seen as part of the vegan campaign, which is a ludicrous thing from our generation's point of view, right? And so there seems to be a little bit of still confusion about rights and welfare that have gone on, and it's always been there, and live exports kind of brought it to a head, if you like, because a lot of vegan-oriented people wanted to do something about what they were seeing, right? But to actually put across an abolitionist animal rights position when you're surrounded by all this welfare claims making is incredibly difficult, and that's quite apart from the outcome of the campaign. If it was successful, wouldn't really do a great deal from an animal rights point of view. So it's kind of problematic in that sense. This one is what you were talking about, Ronnie. So it's saying that at least 20 ships were caught in that log jam.
Yeah, and these were from other EU countries that are exporting the animals to, I think, to the Middle East.
It says the Amiga Star left Spain. That was on the way to port.
Yeah, there's Romanian ships as well.
Yeah, so that's Egypt, right? Jeddah that's Saudi Arabia,
and that's still going on. And you know, our power here in the UK to do anything about that is now massively diminished because of Brexit. You see, so.
Well, to be kind of devil's advocate, Ronnie, if Britain was still in the EU, the argument would be that you wouldn't have this ban because you would have had to get all the other nation states of the EU to agree to
yes,
it
but you
first.
see, all that's happened with this ban is that those animals are now going to be exported from other EU countries, from EU countries. Instead of from the UK. So there isn't going to be any reduction of live exports. They're just going to go from elsewhere. You see, and with the UK no longer being part of the EU, there's very little we can do about that. We can't elect representatives to go to Europe and try to end the live exports. That's no longer available to us.
Well, I know that the Irish farmers will be gearing up to try and plug the gap, and that obviously means that the journeys will be longer because Ireland is further away, and we've actually got to go round Britain to get to Europe on the beginning of the journey to the, Egypt, etc. And now this is the final one, I think. You wanted to say this thing. Do you want to go to the right one first, Ronnie? You were saying that this is highlighting what you were just saying, that the
EU's contribution to
which is ongoing,
continuing and ongoing contribution to live exports. The one on the right, it's very. It may be very small for people to see. The one on the left it shows that this has been hailed as a ban, but it's actually it's actually only a very partial ban. Only a lot of animals can still be exported, and the ones that the ban applies to can still be exported for certain reasons. So it's by no means a total ban on live.
I wonder why do they exclude birds? Why does do you know what I mean? I wonder how they justify. Okay, so we're going to ban the live export of these these different species, but not birds.
I wonder where birds though, Wendy.
Oh, okay, so but it doesn't include. But they can still send birds for other reasons, I guess. Like they can still send other animals for different reasons other than fattening and slaughter, can't they? So that
I think the smaller ones. I mean, obviously they would send eggs if they're going to send anything to be incubated. They wouldn't send actual hens. So because I mean, if you go back to your numbers, there's no mention of so-called poultry there. You've got cattle, pigs, sheep, goats, and horses, right? So I think that's the kind of answer to that. I think.
Yeah, and I guess that could still be used anyway as some kind of loophole for anyone who did want to, like, for example, for the so-called pet industry, birds can still be exported anyway within that ban, can't they? It doesn't cover anything.
Birds get the shitty end of the stick on all animal welfare legislation, especially in the United States, where they've always been excluded from welfare legislation. Goes back to this thing that. From an animal rights point of view, is I've always said that if you start to try to regulate atrocities, you end up in an incredibly messy situation. And I think this live export thing is a perfect illustration, because you can see why, some people might want to do something about it rather than just say, well, just leave it as it were. Let's just do vegan education. See that? I mean, like, for example, Patrice, she presumably would be in favor of campaigning against live exports while doing vegan education.
Possibly. I don't know what her stance would be on that, but maybe. But I think her main thing is obviously trying to, educate people on the atrocities, the fundamental wrongs, rather than let's just put a ban date, as Jeremy says there. But it is a difficult one, and I think, like, if I had a choice and someone would say, right, would you take away all these welfare organisations and just have, if you had the amount of vegans that you've got now on their own doing vegan education and take away all the welfare organisations, would you do it? And I don't know if I would, because at the moment, at least they've got some presence out there with some messages and some reforms happening that might help some individuals, that without them we'd be a very, very tiny number of people trying to change people who are not willing to listen. So I don't know whether I'd magic them away, but I don't feel that there's a strong enough abolitionist end of use message out there to run alongside this. That's my worry and my problem with this, and there aren't enough of us to do it.
I mean, personally myself, I've always, and this is just my opinion, but I've always found the whole welfareist issue, I find it terribly damaging, if I'm brutally honest. I find it very damaging right across the board. I think it's very confusing. I think it sends out terribly mixed messages when it's about the rights of those animals, the same as, we wouldn't want things to happen to us, and we don't want things to happen to them in equal measure. And whenever there's a welfareist point of view, I always just put my head in my hands and think, oh Jesus, here we go again, when it should be a total abolitionist message to me. It's I just always feel that we're compassion in wool farming, there is no such thing as compassion in wool farming. It's just an absolute joke. And that's how I feel about it. And, aren't these people really just avoiding the whole situation of just saying to themselves, maybe we should just go vegan and stop all this shit? Really? This is really what the elephant in the room is, that really. It's all this other language and all this other messing around, and actually just not going, just think about what you're doing. Just think about it. What's easier than going vegan? Just stops all the shit that's out there happening, to animals. It's the answer to everything on this planet, and yet it's the one thing these people will not do, and it's the one thing that makes my pee boil. It really does, because I just don't get it. I don't get it. How is that? These are intelligent thinking people, that get into governments and they talk to people in power, and this is what they come up with. It's just beyond
It's because they can't do anything else. You can't go to Parliament a speciesist parliament and ask for animal rights, because they'll just tell you to sod off, right? Because animal rights is
the very thing we should
far
still
too
be
radical for
striving
them.
to do.
I mean, once again, we're back to vegan outreach on that, aren't we? If ever we're going to have a chance to have a decent administration in this country that is going to listen and take notice of animal rights campaigners and pass the legislation accordingly, we've got to educate far more people to become vegan. Otherwise, where are we going to get the vegan politicians, and where are we going to get the people to vote for them if we don't do that? And I think the welfarists are going to do welfare anyway. So like the RSPCA thing, the welfarists are going to do welfare anyway. The question is, to what extent should vegans be involved in any of that? That's the question. And I think that kind of, I would go to a welfarist demo, welfarist protest, but my objective in going there would be to educate the people on the protests to become vegan.
Well, that's what Wendy was saying.
Exactly. It wouldn't be to promote welfarism. And I think it's the difficulty we have is people who are vegans being diverted down these kind of dead end streets, I suppose, of welfarism.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't help is when we start using welfare language, because that just confuses everybody.
And what concerns me a little bit about this is the public, when they read that, when they see that, they just think, well, I can carry on eating meat because they've stopped live exports. They don't see in their head that you can't carry on, you can't carry on doing that. They just simplify it and go, oh, well, that's stopped now.
Yeah,
so
but
I
Louise,
to
pick up on what Wendy said, then, Louise, is it better for compassionate wool farming not to exist? Do you think?
If you want my honest opinion, I would say I'd rather they didn't exist. That's my honest. That's my honest gut feeling. That's my honest gut feeling, because anything less, you are letting those animals down, and. To me,
I agree with that. I'm more with Ronnie, where what we need is a separation, a clear separation between the two, so that we don't keep getting ourselves confused with each other. Right? And go, that's a welfare thing. This is a rights thing.
Yeah, because the question about whether or not would it be good for them to exist or not exist, we can debate that for ages. But the fact is, they do exist, and they're going to kind of continue to exist, because there are people who are kind of out and out welfarists. But the question is, should vegans become involved with them? And I think the answer to that is no. We have a better use for our time, energy, and other resources, and that is educating others to become vegan.
Well, I got a question for everybody. Do you think?
So have I. You go first. I've got one too.
All right. Well, you go first then.
Are you sure? You can go first if you want. It might be the same question, which would be funny.
Yeah, go on then.
My question is, so especially in light of the RSPCA campaigns that are going on and the focus there is, are welfare organisations a legitimate target for animal rights advocates? So if no, why not? And if yes, what is to be gained? So that I'd like to ask all of you and anyone in the chat what they think about that.
What do you mean by
your question? Well, for example, all the campaigns that are going on at the moment against the RSPCA, like calling them out on all the stamps that they put on so-called high welfare, so-called meats, and trying to veganize the RSPCA because they're shaming the RSPCA, saying you're supposed to be against animal cruelty and yet you're not, because there's this whole cruelty confusion with the whole welfare language in the movement. And so I just wonder if you would think that are they a legitimate target? Is that a good thing that we could do? Can we gain anything from that? Or is this, again, another waste of our time? Are we going down another tangent, diversion, as Ronnie said earlier?
Me personally, I would probably do my own thing on it and stay away from that kind of thing regarding going for the RSPCA. I mean, yeah, I would probably go for the RSPCA if I saw somebody with a stalls and saying, look at all the different labels you put on meat, and you legitimise the slaughter of those animals, you legitimise their suffering, you make it okay, and that just makes our job animal liberationists, our job's so much harder to get that message across, and I see them as a major barrier. But I wouldn't, if I was doing campaigning, I would just do vegan campaigning and keep away from that. But my own gut feeling would still be to kind of say to the RSPCA organisation of the RSPCA or Compassion Animal Farming, why don't you just get out of the fucking way, please? Why don't you do that? Because you're just making it all so much harder for us and for the animals that we're trying to free from their incarceration. You know, just move out of the way, because you're doing more harm than good. And that's how I would feel about it. But I would certainly, as an animal rights campaigner, go forward and do vegan education and leave it at that for me.
So do you think they are a legitimate target then, Louise? Would you campaign against the RSPCA and say, back off, get out of the way? Or are you saying you don't want to?
Partially would, but I wouldn't totally make that my focus. It would still be to veganize people and to go forward with that vegan message. But I would, if there was a campaign against the RSPCA and there were activists there, then I would join them. Yeah, definitely.
Because they are trying to veganize. They're trying to get the RSPCA to go vegan, aren't they? Or to have vegan.
Well, I would love that to be the case, but I can't see that. I can't see the RSPCA ever being veganized because they come from a speciesist place. So I can't see that at the moment, but who knows what might happen in the future. Things might really swing about, but I can't see that now.
I feel that these organizations, and I have a very superficial knowledge about it because we don't have, the same kind of organization here. I feel that they are not honest in what they try to do. Actually, my first thought when I hear about the RSPCA or the compassionate farming thing is that these are part of the meat industry. This is a moral washing and nothing more. So in that sense, they would make, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we find out that, the brain behind these campaigns are actual farmers.
I think that used to be the case in RSPCA, didn't it?
They are, yes. In a way, they have hitchhiked the animal protection movement, though, because they pose as people that care about, the welfare and well-being of other animals. So they should be stopped at some point. I don't know if I would, sacrifice resources, but I would definitely, make press announcements about it during not during the campaigns, maybe, but right now after the ban, just to make to let the press and the audience, because what they do is that if they are loud and the audience hears them, so if they hear them, they don't hear the vegan groups. They cannot listen to vegan groups. So I would definitely do something about it. Because they have been hitchhiking the movement, and it's not from genuine concern, because the people that are going to Camp Big and are not vegans, but they are really worried about the dogs. They are species, they care only about the dogs, but they genuinely care about the dogs. But these huge organizations that, are fighting for...
There are, to be fair though, there are individuals in the RSPCA who do really genuinely care in some way about so-called companion animals. Basically, that's what they do, isn't it? They go around and there are cases of terrible neglect and of our fellow animals in horrendous states that do get some help from these people. Now, I've found myself saying so many times, God, I fucking hate the RSPCA, and told people don't go near them and all this. But then I think, well, if they weren't there, how many other individuals wouldn't have those resources, wouldn't have money being given to them to help go out? So, like, do you take them away, or do you know what I mean? It's kind of, we're in such a mess. This is why I wrote that message just before the show, like, fake the world's in a mess. It's like, it's so messy. Because they do some good for some individuals, but they let other animals down in so many other ways. So
They're not going to go away, though, Wendy. I think that's the thing.
Well, yeah, of course they're not. This is just my fantasy world.
They're not going to become a vegan organisation. So all these people campaigning to get them to become vegan, it's a total waste of resources, really. And the way to challenge it is true that it's that their endorsement of certain animal products or animal products from certain producers and certain farms, could cause people to think, well, that's okay. Now I can carry on eating animal products. But our answer to that should be to point out, what is the fundamental wrong? Because what the RSPCA is doing with their Approved campaign is just trying to improve the conditions under which those animals are oppressed and exploited. Now, whether they're doing that very well or not so well is another question. But the fundamental wrong isn't how those animals, the conditions that those animals are kept in. Fundamental is that those animals are exploited, oppressed, and indeed slaughtered in the first place. And if we make that clear to people, it won't matter about RSPCA approved or anything like that, because that will be irrelevant to those people, because those people will see that they need to no longer be part of the fundamental wrong and no longer consume animal products because other animals are exploited to produce them. I mean, that's how we need to tackle this. And it's once again, it's a diversion. Vegans being diverted away from the most important thing we should be doing, which is educating others to go vegan. And my position would be to just ignore the RSPCA and just concentrate on vegan education.
I've always spent my life ignoring the RSPCA, quite frankly, and steering people away. But,
hey, well, Ronnie, look at this. This is more like a question for tomorrow, because we've got a still alive tomorrow, people, and this is an interesting kind of one. Yeah. It feeds into my overall position, which is, it is true. Our questions are related, Wendy, in the sense that there's a lot of talk about making the RSPCA go away. And Ronnie is going, well, they're not going to go away. And Ronnie, their argument then, in turn, is, well, neither is the exploitation of so-called farm animals. So therefore, we've got to try and intervene and do something on the welfare front. What's needed is not for the RSPCA to go away as such. It's for us to go away from them and differentiate ourselves from them. And so that was going to be my question, whether in the absence of, let's use the F word, in the absence of Francione in the movement, people have really started to mix up welfare and rights all over again, the kind of thing that he tried in the 1990s to separate out, and so did Tom Reagan, try to separate out, because the theory of animal rights and the theory of animal welfare are different, but the outcomes are different. Animal rights is about abolishing animal use. Animal welfare is about regulating their treatment while they're being used, right? And so if we were able to separate ourselves, it would be a massive help. It would be a huge help if the welfare say, oh, well, that's a rights thing, go and see the rights people. And then the rights people go, oh, well, that's a welfare thing, go and see them. Because the two things are related, but not the same. And it seems to me to be, I mean, the related part of it is why Francione came up with the idea of new welfarists, because there are a lot of people who are abolitionists who think you can get to abolition through welfare. So that complicates the issue, right? And so there's not just two camps, the kind of welfare and rights. There's kind of welfare, new welfare and rights. And the new welfare are kind of like oscillate between the two in a way. So it's a little bit complicated. But the modern day movement probably if they heard me say this, they'd go, "What the hell is he on about?" They wouldn't know what I was talking about, because welfare and rights seem to be the same to them now. It seems to me, and it seems as though the movement has lost its understanding that animal rights is not animal welfare, and animal welfare is not animal rights.
I think that the movement deep down knows, but sometimes we feel helpless. I have a question for you. When you cannot stop the slaughter of an individual, an actual individual that you can see, you cannot save them from slaughter, but they are living their lives. I'll give an example here in many regions, although it's illegal. Horses, donkeys, sheep, and calves sometimes have their front legs tied to their hind legs, so they cannot move around, which is very, very painful, of course, and dangerous. And it's a brutal violation of rights, and it's illegal, but it's done. So in many areas, vegans cannot rescue these animals, actually rescue them, but what they can do is, small campaigns, or going to the police, or protesting about certain individuals, so they can go on living their lives and end up slaughtered, of course, but not with their legs tied. This is completely welfarist, and I get that, but shouldn't I do it? I mean, if I come across an individual that they are in that predicament, just because I cannot, spare them from slaughter or make people respect their moral rights and their right to live free, and
Well, the beginning of the answer. The beginning of my answer to that would be to ask you a question. Like, for example, is there the equivalent of the RSPCA there?
No.
Okay.
There's no welfarist organization here. You can just go to the police.
Well, in that case, that seems to kind of alter the situation on the ground a little bit. In the sense that it's almost as though if that situation arose in Ireland with the ISPCA and Britain with the RSPCA, it'd be almost like a question of passing the case on, right? Because this is not a kind of vegan concern. This is a welfare campaign. So alert the welfare to it. It's the same way as if you got somebody doing an expose of, say, let's just as a recent example, a gas chamber, and there was something not right, and it had a welfare sign on it. You just go and alert them and say, "Oi, your system's not working too well," right?
So then are we acknowledging then as rights advocates we do need the welfarists while we're living in a speciesist world? They do have a place for things like that, for passing on those cases, which they don't always turn up to, by the way. I've seen many incidents where you ring them and it's like, "I'm really sorry, we can't come and and then the vegans have to get involved because the welfarists don't get involved.
That's true as well. I think it's difficult. I wrote years ago, a blog entries and it was called Welfarists Do Welfare, Big Wow or something like that. And it was the fact that, there is kind of room for welfarists. And the RSPCA, going back to your point, Wendy, do a pretty good job when it comes to, horses. Horses trapped in muddy fields and all that kind of stuff. They do a pretty good job. They've got the inspectorate kind of thing. I mean, in some ways, what's caused a lot of confusion is the fact that the RSPCA have moved into an area, farmed animals, which they didn't usually get involved in at all. I mean, you'd know them as the cat and dog people, and then they came out against blood sports and this kind of stuff, although that was kind of interaction between the rights and welfare, I suppose. But generally speaking, they didn't really have much of a policy about so-called farmed animals until recently, right? And so I suppose that's caused a bit of confusion in the sense that they wouldn't have gone to the RSPCA for a quote about farmed animals. They go to Viva or Animal Aid, the press, right? Whereas now the RSPCA are involved as well. It's kind of muddied the territories. There's a kind of unhelpful overlap now, perhaps.
What I find most annoying Go ahead, Wendy. Sorry.
Sorry, this is Jeremy's comment. Looks like we've reached the tail end of the chat.
Oh,
Brian.
yeah.
Sorry.
I just want to say that what I find most annoying is that these organizations do not want to stay in their lane. I mean, that's why separation is not possible, because they need to pose as, genuine protecting animal species.
I don't really agree with that. I think the RSPCA have been very honest about their position, that they're a traditional animal welfare group, and that's all they do. They're not abolitionists. They don't advocate for veganism. I think they're being very honest about it. And the main thing that they're driven by, in terms of their farmed animal advocacy, is animal welfare science. And I think they've been very, very kind of honest about it. Again, going back to gas chambers, you got groups like PETA who are campaigning for the gas chambers, which is never recognized now. And the reason that they were for the gas chambers is on welfare grounds. And so the RSPCA were also for the gas chambers on welfare grounds, because the electrified tongs were seen as crueler than the gas chambers, right? Now, all these welfare groups have discovered that, it's not, a great thing. The gas chambers are not what they thought they were going to be. And so now they want a third type of method now. And that's what they're advocating. There's about 60 animal welfare groups advocating for a third method, because the gas chambers, which were to replace the tongs, have not been as good as they thought they would. But it was all done for animal welfare reasons, which is what they stand for. So I think they're honest, actually.
And actually, a vegan Colleen says Nella's question wasn't really answered. So what? Yeah, in terms of,
I think we all do think. Although, I mean, obviously, my main focus is vegan outreach, and I encourage all vegans to become involved in outreach. There are other things, that I'm bound to do in relation to other animals, and improving the situation for animals that aren't outreach. I mean, for instance, if I may help to, I may take an injured animal to the nearest wildlife hospital, for instance. If I do that quite often, with maybe hedgehogs and pigeons and that kind of thing. I'll help if the situation arises. I'll help find a home or a sanctuary place for an animal's that's been abandoned, for instance. These things do come up in our lives that we need to deal with, and maybe the situation with these animals with their legs tied together, that's something similar to that, something immediately there that needs dealing with. But that doesn't take away from our the vast majority of our focus needing to be on vegan outreach.
Yeah,
I think that's
Colleen is saying where there's no welfare groups, like in Greece, and there's a welfare issue that comes up, should the vegans kind of tackle it? And so you can see it in a kind of, if we're all traveling somewhere and suddenly someone is in need of help, we would give it. But we wouldn't set ourselves up for that, presumably. Although, in the absence of a welfare group, that makes it more. I mean, there's no one to, as it were, pass the issue on to in Greece. So I could see the issue.
This kind of makes me think about the ecofeminist ethos of care, actually. Because I suppose when you're in that situation, you're coming across people in your own community. So whether the sheeps or the cows with their legs tied, that's local activism, isn't it? You're in your community, and it's that ethos of care. Like, how do I care for those around me in this community, in this situation, with an intersectional lens of how all of our oppressions intertwine? And I suppose it comes back to that in a way, like, and even kind of thinking about, there's a welfare issue, let's pass it on. Maybe that would kind of be where the ethos of care would be different, maybe, in that actually, if we all dealt with what was around us in our local communities with this ethos of care, of how do we care for all of us, including the environment, humans, our fellow animals, in a community way, local, then if everyone was doing that, wouldn't that just have this massive ripple effect that all our communities would be much more caring and compassionate and respectful, and have much more, equality and respecting each other's experiences, more so than if we just that thought of kind of coming across something and going, oh no, we pass that on, actually, because we've got this ideal that we kind of feel this should be happening, and it's not.
Yeah, but Wendy, all I'm hearing is that we all become welfareists.
I suppose, isn't that just putting a label on caring, though? Sometimes, like, it's like with Nella's saying about these individuals that you're coming across. Are you a welfareist if you go and help those individuals and then try to do something in that community to help them further? Is that a welfareist, or?
It's almost
like, isn't that just labeling everything and putting it in a neat little box? Like, oh, I'm an abolitionist, and I've got this neat little box with a ribbon on it, and I only do these things. Over there, they're the welfarists, and they do these things, and we're separate. And actually, isn't life a lot more complex and nuanced than that?
Yeah,
really?
I would agree with that. But there are good reasons why you've put yourself in the abolitionist box, because that's ultimately what you want, and that's your thing, right? So to the extent that you do the other boxes, is what Ronnie is saying, is you've become diverted. Now it's not as though you can avoid it, and so whether it's we're traveling in a car and we see someone in need, you would do something. In Nella's situation, especially in the absence of a kind of welfare structure, that makes it even more kind of complicated in a way. But I'd be reluctant to kind of go too far, otherwise it's just all going to kind of then dissolve into welfare. It seems to me.
I tend to just come from an animal liberationist view. That's really it. If I saw somebody in trouble, I would still help them as an animal liberationist, or if it was an animal in trouble, I would still do the same thing. And if I came across animals' legs tied up, then I'd go and get some scissors out of the glove box or whatever I had as a sharp implement and
stab the farmer
as an animal liberation.
Say that out loud.
Yeah, but isn't the more fundamental question? Isn't the more fundamental question is
stab the farmer? I said.
Oh yeah, stab the farmer. Let's kill him.
If the tying of the legs was routine, which I think Nella is saying it is, does that mean you would then start a campaign on that? Diverting from the vegan education.
You can't even start a campaign because it's already legal.
It's already legal. It's already
legal. That's the thing.
It's against the law already. They're just breaking.
But maybe it's the awareness. Maybe it's talking and speaking to that person, saying, maybe you need to rethink this, or just try and get up a conversation. And this again is where the kind of community side of it comes in, is building up that conversation and talking and spreading that kind of wording, so that those things do change, even though that is illegal already. It makes it kind of harder, but there's lots of things in this country that are kind of illegal, and people still go out, they still fight. None of this is what I would call an easy thing, but you just go out. I mean, maybe it's just me being me, but always in my mind, that's what I think. Always in my mind, I'm thinking as an abolitionist. So if I go out and I see something and I think I can do something about it, that's what I do. And if the person's in problem, I don't react any differently. I go over and help as an animal liberationist. All of those things are connected to me, and that's it. Maybe that's too simple, I don't know, but that's how I feel.
It's not too simple. And this makes me think that in most cases, when vegans get involved with something, even if it's to help some individual, or to take advantage of some welfareist campaign, when vegans get involved, most of the times my experience is that they take the opportunity to pass on the abolitionist message.
Yes,
they use, vegans usually use every opportunity for outreach.
Yes, and do the welfarists usurp what we do? Do they usurp our movement for what they want? Do they take those things that we talk about and kind of almost usurp them for what they want?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Like,
we
often think it's the other way around. It's the welfarists kind of diluting.
They're wanting.
Are they taking parts of our movement and
they do,
them? And I think that. I think they do. I think it's our movement that's actually the strongest movement of all movements. And they come in on that because they don't feel comfortable about how they feel about their welfareist message. They know it should be stronger. Deep down, I believe they know it should be stronger, but they go, well, we're never going to get that, so we have to do this instead. And you think, actually, no, we can go forward and we can get that. It's just going to take a lot longer than having all this welfareist bollocks,
Oh, that should go on the t-shirt as well. That's 2 t-shirts from Louise tonight.
But do you see what
all this welfareist bollocks on him?
Yeah, but it is true to say, do they usurp our movement? Do they come in on that? And that's what they want. They want a slice of that pie. But they're just not sure because the language of that pie means that you've actually got to stop doing what you're doing first. And they don't want to do that.
I think this.
You know what struck me as well, Louise, thinking about that, when I was reading that article about the containers, the ships stuck in Suez those years ago, all of the complications that were coming as a result of those ships being stuck and the things that we're having to do, and these other animals are being slaughtered now, and everyone's worried that they might not be able to get the food into the cows, and this might happen, and now they're going to have to move these ships over. And I was thinking, all of this, like, to justify your speciesist, I don't know, just desires and just. Yeah, and just to keep consuming and using and all of that and all of this, and can you not just see this doesn't even need to be happening at all? And it just boggles my mind of the whole thing, the world, how messy it is because of use of other animals is just unbelievable.
I used to say, like, a fork full of all this suffering for a fork full of meat that you're going to shit out in half an hour.
That's pretty quick.
I know the t-shirt design.
Lovely Louise. Louise should set up her own t-shirt slogan.
I have heard vegans say this, which is a further complication, but I think there's an element of truth in it, that vegans should do welfare because the welfarists don't do welfare very well, and that vegans would do it better. And certainly in terms of claims making, you can see where that's coming from. Because if we were to tackle a welfare situation like the one that Nella articulated, we would come at it with abolitionist language, an ethos and an ideology, and not just a, poor little animal type thing. So I think there is something in that which causes, again, a bit of complication, because these conversations are never easy, because everybody's obviously going to want to do as much as they can, as quick as they can, and help as many, especially the ones who are right in front of them. But when you're saying, Nella, that you've got, people going, we've got to get some boats out to maybe get some food out to those ships and this kind of stuff. You're gonna end up in a full-time job doing that in the end, and your abolitionist stuff has gone out the window. So that's the problem with it. And I don't think whichever way we tilt, it's easy, because it's almost like you've got to put a barrier and say, okay, this far and no more, or something like that. Yeah.
I think that there is a fundamental problem that the vast majority of vegans don't do outreach, or they don't get out there and actively to educate others, and that's fundamental problem, because even if all those people were to do some animal rescue and maybe some welfareism as well, if they were actually getting out and spending at least some time educating others to go vegan, we'd make massive strides forward. There is a huge problem of all these people that kind of don't really do anything apart from just avoiding doing things, in other words, avoiding consuming animal products, for instance, and they're not doing anything active. And that in itself is a really serious problem. We can talk about those people who are active. What should activists be doing? Should the activists be doing welfare? Should the activists be doing outreach? Should the activists be doing rescue? We can talk about that.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. If there was more activists, it wouldn't be such a problem.
There'd be more
what
activists.
they were doing. Yeah,
problem.
Right,
There's not enough activists doing any form of activism, and that's the kind of, in a sense, that's a much more serious problem.
Could be. So we're over time. Surprise, surprise, Wendy and Nella.
I know Brian's alarm's going up in the background. I was like, "Whoa, is that really the time?"
Yeah.
Quick question for all of you to answer.
Oh, no.
If you
No such
win
thing
the
as a
lot,
quick question.
no, there is. If you win the lottery at the weekend, not that you might do the lottery, but if you won the lottery at the weekend, will you be donating some money to the RSPCA in your will?
Well, I don't do the lottery because the lottery's a tax on the poor. All these good causes. The lottery supports the rich should be taxed to pay for them.
Yeah, I know Ronnie would make
somebody on benefit
points,
hoping that they can get out of their misery by winning the lottery and spending.
Answer the question, Ronnie. Answer the question.
So I don't do the lottery out of political.
I've been accused of dodging Nella's
anyway,
question, so answer the question.
If I were to come across the million, no, I wouldn't. I would use that money to promote and fund vegan outreach. I wouldn't give any of it to the RSPCA.
And
I was kind of joking.
Pretty much the same. I
didn't think any of you.
RSPCA with my money. No. I'd probably give it to probably the Hunt Saboteurs and Autonomous Direct Action and anyone out there doing some really good
me?
stuff.
Would you give me any of the money or not? No.
Oh God, no.
No, I didn't.
No.
You don't
Go on
mind.
holiday.
You'll have my pension, though. I know that.
Oh yeah.
Right. Well, this is going somewhere we didn't expect. So. Do you think it's a good place to wrap up before we have a domestic incident?
Yeah, domestic situation, everyone.
Yeah, we know Louise is a dab hand with glue, so we don't want to go down that road.
No, that could be that could be quite nice.
Glue on you go.
Now, Louise, I want you to promise not to injure Ronnie because he's got a show tomorrow.
Yeah, don't glue me.
Oh, and if he comes,
don't glue me to anything.
If he comes on the screen, oh no, right.
You can glue him to the mic. That'll be all right. Right. Okay, folks. So thanks so much for staying with us. I hope you found that interesting. Any final thoughts, anybody, or should we just go? Oh, silence. So that's the first.
I'd just like to say thank you so much to Louise and Ronnie for coming on.
Yes. Would be if I was to say, don't you? Anyway.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you to our guest panelists.
If you're not vegan, go vegan. if you're vegan but not an activist,
Oh
become
no!
an activist.
Oh
If
no!
you're a vegan activist but not an organizer and an instigator of vegan outreach, then become that. And that's my. I've never said that before.
I think you need to add one.
Thanks
Add
for
one on, Ronnie.
asking me onto the show as well. It's been really good.
No, thanks for coming so much. It's been really good, really great chat.
I've loved it. Thank you, Nella. Thank
I'm
you.
looking forward to Louise's t-shirt company.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Why are you going to stop all this shit?
Right, people. Don't forget, still alive tomorrow. So we'll see you then, and that's an hour later than this was. So, if that means anything for you, but in terms of British Irish time, it's 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. So, thanks again for sticking with us, and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.